We have millions of yards of dirt that needs to get moved every year or else, and that makes me really nervous if something goes wrong, right?
Same season, same area, but two men face diametrically opposite fortunes. On one side is Parker Schnabel, whose mine yields gold that has shaken the entire gold rush. And on the other is Rick Ness, whose mining has been abruptly halted. This story isn't just about hard work. It's about making the right decisions at the right time and the dire consequences of one small mistake, which will leave you watching the video unscathed. When excavation begins at Parker's site, everything seems normal, but within a few days the wash plant's findings are astonishing. While 100 tons of soil typically yields barely 1 to 1.5 ounces of gold, Parker's land yields over 3 ounces. In just 1 week, his team extracts approximately 1,200 ounces of gold, estimated to be worth approximately 30 to 35 crore rupees in the market. Experts believe that the ground Parker is working on may contain over 25,000 ounces of gold, a total value of approximately $50 million at today's prices. Meanwhile, circumstances change dramatically. A government investigation team suddenly arrives at Rick Ness's site and thoroughly examines the ground's stability, safety measures, and permits. The report reveals that the underlying layers are extremely unstable, with a 40% risk of collapse. Furthermore, certain necessary safety permits are not completed on time, leading to an order temporarily banning Rick Ness from mining. This decision not only halts operations, but also results in Rick incurring losses of approximately $50,000 to $70,000 per day. On one hand, Parker is extracting gold worth millions of dollars every week, while on the other, Rick watches his fortunes crumble as he shuts down his machines. The biggest question now is whether Parker's $50 million win is just luck, or is there a deeper strategy behind it, and whether Rick Ness's ban will be lifted in the short term, or will it change the course of his entire mining career. If you don't watch this video in its entirety, you'll miss the biggest twist in Gold Rush. And if you haven't subscribed yet, remember, the whole world will see the next shocking revelation before you. Parker Schnabel doesn't just start digging on any land, and this is what sets him apart from other miners. Before this season, he spent months carefully studying old drill data, sample reports, and geological maps. In an area others considered risky, Parker saw something different. While old drill holes had found little gold on the surface, heavy particles and thick gold traces were clearly visible in the underlying layers. Parker understood that while this land might appear weak from the surface, real treasure could be hidden beneath. Based on this confidence, he decided to take a multi-million-dollar gamble. When selecting this land, Parker looked not only at the quantity of gold, but also at the soil texture and water flow. The geological report clearly stated that this area was part of an old river channel, where heavy gold settles to the bottom. Digging in such areas is difficult, but if the right layer is found, the results can be enormous. Parker knew it wouldn't be an easy path, but great rewards always come with great risks. He had already prepared to deploy more machinery and dig deeper, confident that if this ground was opened, it would change the season. When the digging began, nothing special was visible in the first few weeks. The soil was the same ordinary color, and the gold from the wash plant was around average. The team began to suspect that perhaps this ground wasn't as special as they had thought. The daily routine continued, the machines ran, the trucks hauled soil, and the day ended without any major excitement. Parker, too, remained calm on the outside, but deep inside, he was constantly monitoring the data. He knew that in this kind of ground, the real story unfolded slowly. The calm of the early days was the most dangerous, because that's when most miners lose heart. Parker's team often thought that perhaps this would be just another ordinary season. But Parker decides to dig deeper and stay in the same spot. He knows that gold doesn't always shine on the surface. Sometimes it takes patience to find it. That's why when the figures later change, it comes as a shock to the entire team. What initially seemed ordinary ground would become the biggest story of the entire season. For a while after the excavation, everything went smoothly. But one day, the data from the wash plant caught everyone's attention. The machines were running as usual, the soil was being washed, the numbers were showing on the gold counter. Suddenly, the operator noticed that the data on the screen was increasing at a very fast rate. At first, no one paid attention, thinking there might be a problem with the machine's readings, but as time passed, the numbers continued to rise. This was the moment when everyone first realized something different was happening underground. The team immediately began comparing the new data with the previous average. Whereas normally a limited amount of gold was found in a shift, the wash plant was now producing gold at almost twice the rate. Parker was called in and personally examined the data. He knew that such an increase didn't happen by accident. Still, he didn't rush and let the machines run as usual. Everyone wondered, was this really a big sign or a technical error that would shatter expectations? As the day drew to a close, the atmosphere grew more serious. The crew members spoke quietly among themselves, and no one was laughing much. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the wash plant and counter. Parker's face held a strange calm, as if he were waiting for something big to happen. He knew the real truth would only be revealed one day, cleanup day. That day it would be decided whether this increase was real or just a hoax. The morning of cleanup day wasn't like any other. There was a strange silence on the site, as if everyone had a premonition that something different was about to happen. The wash plant was shut down, and the gold was unloaded onto a table. Usually this time there was joking and laughter, but this time everyone was silent. As the first tray was cleaned, the shine was even more intense. The gold was more abundant and felt heavier. No one said anything, but everyone understood this wasn't a normal cleanup. As more trays were opened, the pile of gold grew. Everyone just stared. No one dared to take out their mobile phones, wanting to savor the moment. Parker stood absolutely still for a few seconds, then simply said, "This could just be the beginning." That single line sent everyone into a tailspin. Everyone wondered, if this was just the beginning, what was coming next? The silence that day wasn't due to fear, but rather a feeling that couldn't be described in words. It was the moment when the entire team understood they weren't working on ordinary ground. What had seemed ordinary just a few weeks earlier was now changing the course of the entire season. This was the turning point where Parker's story began to hit the jackpot, and the rest of the world had no idea what lay ahead. Only when a large amount of gold was discovered on cleanup day were experts called in, and the real calculations began. They first looked at the wash plant's average recovery rate, the amount of gold extracted from every ton of soil. While 100 tons of soil typically yields 1 to 1.5 ounces of gold, this site consistently yielded more than 3 ounces. This difference wasn't small, as such a boom in mining occurs only when the underlying layer is extremely rich. This was the first indication that this was no ordinary ground. Geologists then added data on the depth and extent of the excavation. Drill samples revealed that the rich layer wasn't confined to a small area, but stretched for hundreds of meters. If an average of 1 to 200 ounces of gold was being extracted daily and this rate continued, the figure would reach thousands of ounces within a few weeks. At today's market prices, an ounce of gold is worth millions of rupees, and this calculation directly led to a total estimate of around $50 million. Experts also clarified that this figure wasn't made up out of thin air. It was calculated based on soil thickness, layer continuity, and past records. They explained that it's rare to find land where the top layer is ordinary and such a rich channel suddenly opens underneath. This is why this prediction was taken very seriously. Parker himself knew that such an opportunity doesn't come often, and if executed correctly, it could become the biggest turning point in his career. As soon as it became clear that such a huge jackpot lay beneath, Parker wasted no time in changing his strategy. While previously operating with limited machinery, more excavators and trucks were deployed to the site. The speed of excavation was increased, but without recklessness. Parker knew that speeding up didn't mean neglecting safety. Therefore, every move was planned in advance, and every shift was conducted based on data. Shift times were also extended. While previously limited hours were used, longer shifts were introduced to process more soil each day. The wash plant was constantly monitored, and every small change was monitored. Parker clearly told his team that this was not the time to stop, but there was no room for error. His focus was clear: extract as much gold as possible without damaging the ground. Parker's change strategy wasn't limited to increasing machinery. He also decided which areas would be worked on first and which would be left for later. Priority was given to the richest layers, so that if work stopped due to weather or other reasons, most of the gold would already be extracted. This thinking set him apart from other miners. While some rely on luck, Parker based every step on data and experience. This is why the $50 million estimate didn't just seem like a big number, but a concrete reality. This story isn't just about striking gold, but rather shows that with the right data, the right timing, and the right strategy, even an ordinary season can become history. Parker wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away, and his every move proved he was ready for this jackpot. When the story shifts from Parker to Rick Ness, the picture begins to take on a somewhat heavy burden. Early in the season, Rick's ground didn't appear as solid as expected. The top layer of soil was loose, and the underlying layer held excess water, causing the machines to repeatedly get stuck. Every day began with a new problem, and the team began to realize that this season wouldn't be easy. Rick's biggest concern was the stability of the ground. While Parker's ground was solid and planned, the risk of subsidence in Rick's area had been present from the start. In many places, the walls began to settle as soon as they were excavated, forcing work to be halted. This directly impacted production, as machines had to be removed and safety checks repeated. Gradually, the pace of work slowed. Additionally, a lack of funds and resources became a major problem for Rick. Machine repairs, labor costs, and fuel expenses were constantly increasing, but the gold wasn't being produced as expected. Daily expenses were rising, and revenues were falling behind. Under this pressure, decisions had to be made hastily, which later turned out to be even more problematic. Meanwhile, minor warnings began to arrive, which were initially ignored. Safety reports identified certain areas as risky, but stopping work wasn't easy. Rick knew that a complete halt could cost him the season. Therefore, he tried to manage the situation. But the ground conditions were becoming more difficult every day. In the midst of these circumstances, a government inspection team suddenly arrived, and this is where the story completely changed. The team arrived on site without much fanfare and immediately began inspecting the ground conditions, safety arrangements, and permits. It was clear from their faces that they weren't on a formal visit. This was a serious inspection, and the outcome could have been anything. The inspection team's primary focus was the stability of the ground and the safety of the workers. They inspected areas where signs of subsidence had previously been detected and the possibility of flooding had been reported. They also carefully examined the condition of machinery, safety barriers, and emergency systems. Delays in certain documents and questions about the terms of certain permits further heightened the tension. As the investigation progressed, work on the site virtually ground to a halt. Workers stood silently and machines stood silently to one side. This moment was deeply concerning for Rick, as he realized this wasn't just a warning. This was the turning point where his hard work, his risk, and his entire season were at stake. While celebrations were underway at Parker's camp, uncertainty and fear deepened for Rick. As soon as the investigation was complete, a moment came that brought the entire site to a screeching halt. The official held out a document and announced in clear terms that mining was being banned, effective immediately. The reasons were written down: unstable ground, safety risks, and incomplete formalities. For a few seconds, no one understood what had happened. The hum of machinery, which had always been a daily spectacle, suddenly ceased. This wasn't a warning, it was a direct order. As soon as the ban was announced, the entire site fell silent. Excavators stopped, trucks lined up, and the wash plant was shut down. Workers looked at each other, speechless. Rick Ness stood there for a moment as if time had stopped. He knew this wasn't just a decision to halt work, but a moment that would change the course of the entire season. The ban's first impact was on the team's morale. Those who toiled daily were suddenly forced to sit idle. Some workers had to be sent home temporarily, and some machines remained idle in the sun. Everything on the site remained the same, yet everything seemed changed. This was the most difficult time for Rick, as he had to answer to his team, while he himself had none. Now the real pain of the ban began when the financial losses began to surface. The mining shutdown meant that earnings dropped to zero, but expenses remained the same. Workers' salaries, machine rental, and fuel alone were costing around $50,000 to $70,000 a day. Without an ounce of gold being extracted, this amount was going straight into losses. Each passing day was increasing the losses. If this loss is calculated on a weekly basis, the figures become even more frightening. In 7 days, Rick was incurring a loss of approximately $300,000 to $500,000. This included the cost of machine maintenance, site security, and previously signed contracts. Time was already limited due to the weather, and the band took away even that remaining time. Each day lost made it clear that a comeback wouldn't be easy. The biggest blow was that during the ban, Rick couldn't immediately resume work on any other land. Obtaining new permits, new sites, and new planning could take months. This meant the season was almost lost. While Parker was increasing his gold pile every day, Rick saw his expenses list grow longer. This wasn't just a financial difference, it was a future difference. In these circumstances, Rick Ness faced a harsh reality. Whether the ban would be lifted or not was uncertain, but losses were certain every day. The idle machines on the site reminded him that one decision in mining can change the course of his entire life. This was the turning point where the story wasn't just about gold, but about risk, responsibility, and the price to pay. Same time, same area, but the atmosphere of the two camps was completely opposite. At Parker's camp, celebrations had begun as evening fell. Shining gold lay on a table near the wash plant, and people, despite their tiredness, were smiling. Some were patting shoulders, others were quietly observing the pile. This joy wasn't noisy, but rather a reflection of hard work that had paid off. Parker himself wasn't speaking much, but satisfaction was evident in his eyes. He knew this celebration wasn't just for today, but it signified the entire season's victory. The team members were talking about the future, the next dig, the next shift, and the next goal. There was confidence in the atmosphere, as if everyone was convinced the momentum was unstoppable. At the same time, a few miles away, Rick Ness's camp was completely silent. Machines were idle, lights were on, but no work was being done. Workers were slowly returning to their tents. No laughter, no conversation. This silence wasn't just a lack of noise, it was the burden of an uncertain future. Everyone's face bore the same question, one that no one could answer. Rick stood alone, looking out at the site, as if every idle machine was speaking to him. Just a few hours earlier, this place was brimming with hard work and hope, and now everything had come to a standstill. This difference wasn't just a matter of circumstances, it was a difference in decisions. On one hand, there was the noise of success. On the other, the silence of failure. This was the moment that made this story emotional. As soon as the news spread, the entire mining industry was stirred up. People began praising Parker's jackpot and calling him the biggest player of the season. Industry veterans said that such rich land is rare. Many experts also agreed that Parker took a risk, but it was a risk well prepared. On the other hand, different opinions began to emerge regarding Rick's ban. Some said it was a tough decision but necessary. Some believed that if warnings had been heeded in time, the situation wouldn't have been so dire. Rumors were rife. Some were saying the ban would be lifted soon, while others were calling it the end of the entire season. The truth was lost somewhere in the confusion. One theme kept resurfacing in industry conversations. Mining was no longer just a game of hard work. It had become a game of data, safety, and timing. Parker was seen as an example of how planning and patience can yield big results. Rick's case was held as a warning that even small mistakes could be costly. This entire situation made it clear that the gold rush wasn't just a story of gold mining. It was a story of pressure, risk, and decisions, where every step had far-reaching consequences. There was celebration in one camp, silence in the other, and the industry was drawing lessons from both. This conflict makes this story not only interesting but memorable. As news of Parker's success spread, a debate raged over whether it was simply luck or the result of years of careful planning. Some argued that being in the right place at the right time was his greatest strength. But those who had followed Parker's journey from the beginning knew that this victory didn't come by accident. It was the result of months of preparation, studying historical data, and the courage to take risks. Parker's planning wasn't limited to selecting the land. He pre-prepared the machines, trained his team, and prepared for a situation where work suddenly needed to be accelerated. His every move was informed by a thoughtful thought. Where to dig, when to pause, and when to exert full force. Luck certainly favored him, But the skill of recognizing and seizing that luck at the right time is also essential, and this is what sets Parker apart. Amidst this debate, some also believe that the role of luck in mining cannot be denied. No one has complete control over what lies beneath the ground. But when the same fate repeatedly befalls those who come prepared, the question shifts. Perhaps it was a combination of luck and planning, and Parker took full advantage of both. On the other hand, Rick Ness's story had taken a completely different direction. After the ban, his biggest question was what to do next. Resuming mining immediately wasn't possible, and finding new ground would take both time and money. With each passing day, the mental pressure grew, as the responsibility for his team, expenses, and future rested solely on his shoulders. Rick had limited options. The first option was to wait for the ban to be lifted and obtain permission again after meeting all safety requirements. The second option was to abandon this season and begin preparations for the next. Both options were difficult, as the losses had already been substantial. In the meantime, he had to manage his team and protect himself from collapse. The impact of this mental pressure was clearly visible in Rick's decisions. The man who was once unafraid to take risks was now forced to carefully consider every step. He was also haunted by the fear that if he didn't make a quick comeback, his hold on the industry might be weakened. This wasn't just a battle for money, it had become a battle for his identity and self-confidence. At this juncture, the story raises the question of how thin the line between success and failure is. On one side is Parker, whose planning and patience are taking him to great heights, and on the other is Rick, who despite standing in the same industry, struggles with uncertainty. This conflict deepens the story, for behind every victory lies preparation, and behind every defeat lies a lesson. While this twist in the story may seem monumental, the truth is that it's not the end. Parker's jackpot and Rick's ban are just one chapter. The entire book is yet to unfold. Signs discovered underground indicate that the story is about to deepen. The next decision, the next risk, and the next mistake could change everything. The coming days will bring even greater questions. Will Parker be able to maintain this pace, or will too much speed become a threat? Is there a new problem lurking deep within the earth that could suddenly turn this celebration into silence? And the biggest question of all, will Rick Ness somehow make a comeback, or will this season become the most difficult phase of his story? Nothing is permanent in the world of mining. What's on top today can be on the bottom tomorrow. One right decision can lead to millions, and one small mistake can take away everything. This is why this story becomes not just about gold, but about human courage, perseverance, and pressure. There's danger at every turn, and behind every danger lies a new opportunity. If you've made it this far, you've become a part of this story. What lies ahead will be even more shocking than ever before. New revelations, new conflicts, and twists no one could have expected. So if you haven't subscribed yet, do so now, because if you miss the next twist, this story will remain incomplete, and the truth that's about to be revealed will be seen by the whole world before you.